you. Can everyone hear me? Well, hopefully you can hear me. You can't tell me that. Let me share my screen and get underway. Bear with me as I get a little bit of housekeeping set here. There we go. Well, thank you so much for making the time to be with me today to join me in discussing a subject that's been on my mind for decades. And I'm eager to share an approach that I've seen help many organizations. It applies really anytime when things seem very stable and when there are changes coming at us seemingly every moment of every day. So I'm going to have a chance to tell you more about my organization, CBWhite, in the context of this presentation as I try to use myself as an example. But of course, today we're going to talk about marketing with meaning and how to talk about why your organization matters. As you just heard, and as a reminder of the drill, please ask anything that's on your mind in the Q&A section. And before we get further into my content, I'm going to put you to work just a little bit. So I have a 30-second exercise for you, and I'd like you to use the chat box, and I'm going to time us. So to get us started in this 30-second exercise, I'd like you to imagine that you and I are just meeting for the first time. And I say to you, so tell me about your organization in 30 seconds. Ready? Go. Ten seconds left. Well, there it is. Uh-oh. Stop. So reflect on that for a moment. Just think about it for a minute. What was hard about it? What was easy? Do you feel confident that others in your organization would have been able to do that? Would they have told everyone about would they told me about your organization in a way that you wanted them to? Because all these people, the staff, the board, the volunteers, everyone who's part of your organization in any way, they're all your ambassadors. And in a sense, they're all part of your marketing team. So today we're going to start down a path, that is intended to equip all those people to answer the question, tell me about your organization, in a consistent and compelling way. And that's really what this is all about. And I'm going to try to break it down in a way that makes it easy for you to follow as well and continue the work going forward. So in our agenda today, first I'm going to step back just for a moment and make the case for mission marketing. I'll tell you about what I mean by that. Why is marketing so important for organizations, both now and at any time? And I'll use a couple of frameworks for talking about that, the unified voice and the little voice that might get in the way. I'm going to do a little bit of marketing essentials, just some of the language I'll be using to talk about our principles. And then we're going to really use what I sometimes refer to as a positioning Mad Libs or positioning fill in the blanks to help you get moving on how this might apply to your organization. And I'll use a couple of examples as a way of talking about that. And finally, we'll talk about what's next. And we have a couple of ways of approaching that to help you use this moving forward. So first, let's talk about why marketing, and why do I like in particular to make sure we talk about it as mission marketing in our sector. So I'm someone who came over to the nonprofit sector. I was a sector switcher when I founded my organization to focus on working with nonprofit organizations. And I really had to think a lot about what that meant. I had been in the corporate world and needed to think about how did the principles I had learned in using market research to make decisions, how did they apply in this sector? So I like to, and I think it's important to put the word mission in front of it to remember at all times that we are doing marketing to advance our missions. That is, and marketing itself refers to all the activities and actions we use to present ourselves to the outside world. Sometimes people think about marketing as our branding, our selling, our various ways of our websites. And all those things are part of marketing, but in a bigger sense, it's the way of talking about how we present ourselves to the outside world. Sometimes the idea of marketing makes people uncomfortable. They associate it very much with something that's too salesy. And so I want to just take us through a quick look at how to name and maybe reframe the reactions people may have when you talk about marketing. These may be your own reactions, but if not yours, they can sometimes be someone on board or staff that you may be talking to as well. So why does mission marketing matter so much? Sometimes the reaction is, that sounds like selling out. Marketing, I know what that is, I don't like it, and it's not me. It's a sellout. So I think that this gets back to putting the word mission in front of it. In good marketing in our sector is marketing that's authentic because it is firmly rooted in that mission. If you believe in your mission, it should be easy to believe in telling people about it in a way that compels them to take the action that you're seeking. Another reaction, and that's because as consumers, this happens to us sometimes. Marketing can be coercive, intrusive, even manipulative. But mission marketing should not be. And I certainly would discourage you from, if your marketing is stealing, coercive, intrusive, or manipulative, I would think it'd be the time to question it and back off it, because the kind of marketing that fits is going to be about making a match. So again, if you believe in what you do and believe that it meets a need, we would want people to be able to find us at that right moment and help make that match between what we have to offer. Even if that offer is an opportunity to donate to us, we imagine that people are out there who have desires and we want to help them find us. So good mission marketing, and even really any good marketing, is about finding that match, helping them find us, helping us find them, and creating that match. Finally, sometimes people feel that marketing might be wasteful. I need to spend all my money and all my resources on offering programs. I can't spend money on the marketing side of it. So my reframing of that, of course, is that the only way that we're going to have an impact and get those resources into the hands we're trying to reach is by making sure people know about us and know about what we do. So I think it's an investment and it helps you realize your mission. In the end, good mission marketing should enhance support of your organization. It should increase awareness amongst your target audiences, increase attendance, usage, participation. It deepens connections. It should increase revenues. And it has a snowball effect, because the better we're doing at our marketing, the easier we make it for more and more people to speak about us and tell the story even for us. So it has that nice snowball effect. Just pause for a moment and see if any questions are coming in that need immediate attention. And it looks like we're okay for the moment, so we will move along. And there we go. I want to talk about unified voices. So this is another way of thinking about why do I open by saying, and one of the questions I asked you quite early on when I asked you to do that 30-second exercise is, do you think that others in the organization would have also been able to answer that question? What does your organization do? So here's what I have encountered, not an actual example, but a sort of an example of what I've encountered at some client organizations over the years. I can go to an organization and I hear from one person that they offer trainings, and another one tells me about their races, another one tells me they give out bikes, and another one tells me they go to Springfield, and I'm not really sure what they do. But when we do our work together, we try to find a common thread and say, so what's the organization really about? They're about improving Chicago's environment. So here, this happens in marketing. Another example of where this can happen in marketing, I can talk with an organization, I can talk to board members and say, tell me about the organization. And I get an answer like, it's great stuff. I've known them for so many years. The executive director may tell me we're leaders in A and B and C, and they want to tell me all the things they do. And the staff is very good at telling me about their portion of what they do. So how do we get to a unified voice? So those disparate voices that I'm showing you that might talk about specific things, each of which is very important, but hasn't linked together to talk about this goal that's more exciting and will entice people to then want to know about either the advocacy or the handing out of bicycles or the organizing of races, first we have to make sure we have that unified voice that talks about, in this case, improving Chicago's environment. So how do we get there? It's usually obvious once we've gotten there, but how do we get there? And that's once I'll be getting to this exercise we're going to get to shortly, what I refer to as the fill in the blank or Mad Libs type thing. So I'm going to just stop for 1 second though and say, when I've talked to people about this work, as I have over the years, I try to get them to tell me what's going on that might be making them feel uncertain. And I always refer to one client who wasn't so sure he wanted to do the work we were going to do together. And I walked into the room and his arms were like this. And I said, arms are crossed. He's not excited about this. And I said, talk to me. What's in the way? And sometimes I hear things like, we are just too complicated. You don't really understand me. Or in this case, the person with the folded arms, it was, I just want a new website. I don't want to do this other work first. I just want the website. Sometimes it's I don't like marketing. And sometimes it's marketing, my board will do that. Those are the kinds of little voices that can get in the way. So what I would say back to that is complexity is the one that I hear most often. And I say, let's clear up the complexity so that I can understand your organization. Because if I can understand your organization and you can help me understand it, you're going to be able to help others understand it, and you're going to achieve the goal you're after. Again, it's going to help you realize the mission. So with that, a little bit more positioning 101. So I keep referring to a method that's going to help you get to that unified voice. And for that, I want to talk about this thing we call positioning. When we think about positioning and why in marketing do we refer to it as positioning, maybe a way for you to remember, why is that positioning, the right word to use here? Positioning is a way of understanding how does your organization fit into a landscape of alternatives. That is, anyone who may engage with you in any way, whether it's attending a program, coming to your show, listening to your next podcast, they have a range of alternatives in that moment. So you need to, and we need to help them understand who are you and how do you fit into that landscape of alternatives they have. So that's where we get position in the landscape. So that is why we start with landscape, and perhaps you've heard the word landscape analysis. That's when we want to do positioning, we start with your mission. We are firmly rooted in your mission. We don't stray from it. That's your DNA. But we start with your mission, and then we need to look at your landscape. That is, what is that range of alternatives the market has, and what are they like? Who is your target market? And we'll talk a little more about what do I mean by your target market? Who is that person who's most likely to be connected to your organization? I'll just pause here and say that when we talk about target markets, and very often people will say to me, well, if the general public just knew about us, we'd be fine. And I said, well, the general public is a really big target market. And if I said to you, try to tell the general public about what you do, you would get a little caught up and fumbling because you're picturing so many different kinds of people who may want to engage with you for many different kinds of reasons. So to speak really effectively, we think about our target market in somewhat of a bullseye fashion. Who's the center of that? A person who's really likely to be engaged and interested in what you do. And we think about how do we compel that person to be part of you and to engage with you in the way you want. If we speak in a really compelling way to the target market, we tend to reach the rings just reaching out as we move further and further out from that bullseye. And we do speak in a more compelling and effective way when we define our target market. And we'll talk a bit more about target markets in a bit. Finally, with positioning, we think of that landscape, we think of the target market, and then we think about that matching that I talked about earlier, matching your benefits, what you have to offer with the market's needs. And for that, we want to make sure we're speaking their language, what matters to them. Finally, we want to talk about what makes you special. They have alternatives. How are you differentiated and special within their range of options? All right, that's lots of background. I want to get into this fill in the blank. I'm going to give just a quick pause if there's any questions. coming up right now before we get into the fill in the blank exercise. So I'm seeing some questions coming up now. Using graphics to communicate ideas. How many arts organizations are using graphic representation to show mission and value? Are these on your website or blog? I will have to think a bit more about that question, Daniel. I'm going to take us through a bit more and see. I'm certainly happy to share the slides if that's what we're getting at. All right, so to create your positioning, our idea here is to see if we can get to a positioning statement for your organization that will be a foundation for your marketing. So our goal here is to create for you a very firm, high impact positioning statement that helps recognize all those concepts we've just talked about. And if we can create this positioning via filling in some blanks, we will have that place from which all our other marketing can spring. So when I take people through a positioning via fill in the blanks exercise, there's some components to it. So first, for that target person, that target I was just talking about, who has particular needs and wants. So that's someone out there who has needs and wants that fit with what we do. We, the organization, are in a category, and we offer a key benefit. So we're going to get to an example very shortly. Our organization stands out from the primary alternative people may have to meet that need because of our primary differentiation. Okay, that's a lot of fill in the blanks. I think an example is going to help us out. And I've got two to take us through. First example is going to be one that I promised to tell you about, my own organization. And I promised to move us kind of quickly through telling you about this, because then my next example is going to be a recent client who has generously allowed us to talk all about their positioning exercise. So for CBWhite, my landscape analysis, I had to think about the alternatives people have to doing the kind of work I do for them. I do market research. So they can go to other market research companies. I think about, in that case, they might be thinking about someone who doesn't really know the sector very well. They may try the do-it-yourself method. This comes up a lot. They might write their own survey, and I will try to think about the fact that that survey may not be written in an objective manner, or they might not really know how to write good survey questions. They may get pro bono assistance. That can be wonderful, and it can slow things down. So that's, and then the biggie, and it's in bold here, is they can skip the step entirely. I don't need to do that market research. I already know, and that's possible. Depends on the magnitude of the question and what you already have in hand. But that's what I think about when I know my landscape analysis. That's what I'm up against. As you can see, my landscape is not just other market research companies, which is sort of how I define what I do, but includes all kinds of things that might be further outside, including not doing it at all. So our landscape, we have to try to think of in a rather expansive way. What are the market's alternatives? So then I think about my target market. When we think about our target market, again, I'm trying to kind of think about who's that organization or person who's most likely to need or want what I have to offer and have a connection. We're really used to thinking about defining our target markets in rather demographic or basic descriptor type language. For example, this might be a person who leads a Chicago area nonprofit. They're probably a little bit business oriented because the idea is to market research resonates. They may feel a little unsure about marketing or marketing in their organization, and they're hearing a lot of anecdotes. And that's what I see as some of their descriptors. Where describing the target market gets us to a higher impact place in terms of our actual marketing, the thing that we're moving towards, is when we get deeper into their needs and wants. And this is often when I'm facilitating meetings about this, where I say, doors are closed, and this is where you can say things about that target market that we wouldn't say externally, but who are they really? What are they facing? So some things they might need or want. In my case, they might want donors, visitors, audience members, and supporters. They may really need some objective information. They may really be facing loud anecdotes from different either board members or volunteers who are quite sure they know the truth because of something that has happened with one person. And they may need some confidence in their decisions. So they're struggling to make decisions. And they told me when I talked to them after the projects is that once they have this data in hand, they feel far more confident about their decisions and move forward with greater confidence. Again, when I work with clients on this, this is a time that it's really important to be able to talk about things that we might not want to say to others about the deep needs, wants, and attitudes of our target market. So with that in mind, then I try to say, all right, so how would I fill in the blanks for CBWhite? I'd say, all right, my category, it's a market research consultancy. My benefit is I bring information from outside an organization to help people make wise decisions. The alternative, I think, are anecdotes and experience. And the differentiation is objective and sector-oriented research for decision-making. So that gets me into a positioning statement. For nonprofit leaders who need to ensure long-term success, CBWhite is a market research consultancy that knows the sectors and brings data from people outside into the organization to guide wide decision-making. And it stands out from winging it by bringing objective research into the process. So that's a lot. And I'll often say that's a positioning statement. It's not the copy. It's not what's going to go on the homepage of a website. It's not even the language I would use, over a cocktail. It is something that is the basis for all that. So it gets me grounded, and then I can put it into the hands of anyone who helps me with any kind of marketing implementation, and I get it into my own thinking so that I can then move forward with any marketing or communications or casual conversations by knowing that this is the center of what I want to convey. So for an example of how this one became something implementation oriented for me, I share this with someone who's working on copy for me, and they give me this: guiding nonprofits toward their destinations through the art and science of market research. That's just one example of some implementation, but I think it's a nice way to see how we move from a positioning statement to that implementation step. I'm going to pause for a moment before I move to the next example, because I do see a question coming in. Does this apply just to donors or those just needing your organization's services? Great question, Michelle. I would tell you, when I started CBWhite 20 years ago, I was quite certain this would be about donors. And I would say that at least 3/4 of my work, maybe even more, is about users of services, audience members. I do work in cancer, and it's about how to reach cancer patients to use free services or to participate in clinical trials. So it is a really wide range, and it is, while I think it can make sense as to why donors might engage or might donate to your organization, it absolutely can be for the end user. I've worked with the Cradle, and we worked about, which is an adoption services organization. We worked on how to reach people who were having unwanted or unplanned pregnancies. So this can be for all sorts of people you might want to connect with in any way, not necessarily just donation or even just revenue oriented. So thank you for that question, because it's an important one. And yes, I also see, will I share copies of the PowerPoint? Absolutely, no problem. Officially, with permission, but yes, I'm happy to share copies. All right, so I would like to take you into an example. So now I'm going to take it your turn. This is to get you thinking. Now, if we had a day-long workshop, or I've worked with clients on this over multiple weeks, we would spend whole meetings on just each page of what we're about to go through. So what I will encourage, I'm trying to do, is set up a framework for you today that allows you to start thinking about how you would fill this in for your own organization. And I'm going to take you through another example as we do it in real time with an organization I worked with called Foundation 65 that I worked with in Evanston late last year. And at the very end of the session today, what we're going to do is talk about how you can move forward and make sure that if you're interested in how, depending on your level of interest, you can move forward in doing this yourselves for your own organizations. So first, Step one is the landscape analysis. When you want to think about the landscape analysis, here what you're trying to think about is for the need you're trying to address, what are the key alternatives available to the market? This might seem simple and obvious, and in some cases it's simpler than others. But I think some tips to keep in mind are to keep that external orientation, that if there may be some alternatives that you don't really think of as alternatives, for instance, for me, skipping the step, I don't like to embrace that as an alternative, but it is one for the market. And so from the market standpoint, what are those options? Another example, a theater company may think just of other live theater as the alternatives, but should include certainly other cultural experiences, maybe even commercial things like movies or staying home and watching TV. There can be a wide array of alternatives people have. So you want to include similar organizations and go broader, and also consider whether no action itself is an option. So let's look at Foundation 65, their landscape analysis. I'm showing you a subset, just in the interest of time today. This was a donor focused, back to their earlier comment that was made when I told you that probably at least 3/4 of my work is not with donors, but Foundation 65 was donor focused. So this key segment they were thinking about as we worked on this activity was their donors and their key alternatives. So Foundation 65, I'll tell them about you in this context, is a Evanston-based organization that works to support the work of the school district 65. And the key alternatives we thought were the McGaw YMCA, that does youth development, YOU, which focuses on the opportunity gap, and PTAs that are very local to, when we said my school, the markets, the school that the person is connected to. And we noted in their landscape analysis that Foundation 65 is often confused with District 65, which is the actual school district. So that was a grounding for them. So going into the fill in the blanks part, we wanted to think about the target market and their needs and wants. And I will tell you that this is the part where I will show you a piece of it. But as I mentioned, when we talk about target markets, is the part of any of this work where I think it's most important for us to talk about our target market in ways we may not want to talk about on the outside world. Sometimes I worked with an organization that was trying to appeal to North Shore parents, and there were adjectives used that were not necessarily the most flattering, and they were really important to keep in mind so that the organization could market to them in an effective manner. So let's think about it for this one. So when you talk about the target market, I mentioned earlier, we wanted to talk about the center of the market. Our target market can't be the general public. Too big, too many voices there. So when we think about it, we think about the demographics, but even better is to make sure we think about attitudes, needs, motivations, concerns, what keeps people awake at night, what are their worries, what's going on for them, and digging deep. And this is a place where I want to pause and say, one question I've been asked a lot about this work is, how does it apply right now? And I think right here, right on this page, is where we might need to, if we've done this kind of positioning work, and for instance, I did this with Foundation 65 in November and December of 2019. This may be exactly the spot you revisit when the world shifts, when things change. We might say, oh, wait, things have really changed for our target market. What's going on for them now? What are their needs, motivations, and concerns right now? And do we need to shift our positioning? We don't want to make a drastic change without being very careful about it, but what shift might we need to make because our target market has changed in terms of attitudes, needs, motivations, and concerns? I think this is exactly the page to come back to in a time like this. What that also says is I think you have to have done the foundational work to be able to have a page to come back to. That's why I still encourage doing this work at any moment and then being able to revisit it if things change. And then how do you fill their need? This is about them. So this isn't just about what do you do, but how does what you do fill their need? So the more we talk about our target market in terms of, again, that deep level of examining who they are, but also thinking about how you match their need and think in that external way, the better our work will, more effective our work will be. So for Foundation 65 demos, we had demographics that I won't bore you with. Attitudes, needs, and motivations. These are people who are passionate about public education. They care about literacy and the arts. They have a vision of a desired community. And Foundation 65 helps them take action towards that, helps them be locally engaged and have a literacy and arts focus. Next up. Next, we look at the organization's category. The category is a really interesting one I want to chat about for a moment. I'm sorry, I think bear with me one moment. Here we go. Sorry. So the category, and within the category, how does our organization stand out from the alternative because of the differentiation? So when we look at the category, when I say describe your category, this is a place in any of this kind of work that can vary from very simple to kind of complicated. It differs for virtually every client because it links back to that landscape, and it's really a unique piece of the work. It doesn't necessarily seem like it would be hard if you're a grocery store, you're a grocery store, but sometimes the category is actually relatively challenging to consider because we have to think about how broad or how narrow to go. So the challenge here, not only does it differ, but it's naming yourself as a category and really understanding yourself within that category and within your landscape, determining how far out do I want to go. We don't want to be so broad that we say, I'm a nonprofit organization. Well, now that's so broad, the landscape will be huge and not meaningful. If we go too narrow, we won't bring in those that are adjacent to us. So if we talked about a food depository at the corner of North and LaSalle, we've just gotten too narrow. So we want to go kind of maybe think about it a little like Goldilocks, just broad enough, just narrow enough to bring in the adjacent and alternative organizations people have or alternative ways people have to meet the need, not so broad that we are too general. So for Foundation 65, we talked a lot about making sure we named their category. And this really did take quite a bit of time to talk about the fact that they are an independent grant-making organization. And the reason we zeroed in on that is that it was going to help us focus on that differentiation from District 65, which is where their confusion comes in. People confuse them with the actual school district, and what they are is an independent grant maker. Next is the key benefit. This one's really important and usually a great place for the work. Thinking about the key benefit, it's the most compelling reason for that target person to engage in just the way you want them to engage. This is, again, making sure we think about what matters to them. So where we can go wrong when we talk about the key benefit is that we're used to thinking about what we know is important about what we offer. And what really matters in terms of marketing is what compels them to come to us. So asking for input from the outside, asking people why they engage with you, why they donate to you, why they care about you, really will take you a long way towards making your marketing more compelling right here in this spot. As an example from my own, it was finding out that people said it made them feel more confident. It wasn't something I realized, but it helped me, and it made it into my proposal language. This is a place where I almost always get the question, well, I have multiple target types. I have donors, I have audience members, I have so many different target types. That is true of almost all of us. We have multiple kinds of people engaging with us in many different reasons, in many different ways. I would say for this kind of exercise, what's important, more than for this type of work, what's important is to think, who's the priority part of our target from the standpoint of marketing? That is, who do we most need to find us and make sure that our external communication is speaking to them. So who's our priority target type? Doesn't mean that they're our priority for everything we do, but they're priority in terms of communication. We can have more than one. And if we have more than one, we need to make sure that we essentially go through these steps for each of them and then find that common thread. If we go back to this, you think about those unified voices example I gave earlier. We give away bikes, we do advocacy. Those are different things. We might be having different target types, and then we found the common thread, and that's what pulled it together into a positioning statement. So in the Foundation 65 example, key benefits are they are direct to the educators with an equity focus, literacy and arts, local and innovative. So I won't give you too much of their detail on that. And their alternatives and differentiation. When we get to alternatives and differentiation, we want to make sure we just think about look back at our landscape and describe how your organization is distinct or unique. So here we want to look back, and I mentioned that as I walked through the CBWhite exercise. And in the Foundation 65 example, their primary alternatives are child-focused organizations in Evanston, and the differentiation is that their work comes directly to the children, led by the educators, and it amplifies the district's priorities. So how did that all come together? When we pull it all together, again, this is a slide you saw earlier. When we pull it all together, we're going to try to fill in this whole statement. And let's look at the Foundation 65 one. So when we pulled theirs all together, it's for community members who share a vision of equitable education for all District 65 children. Foundation 65 is an independent grant-making organization that offers investment in educator-led initiatives to support educational equity through literacy and the arts. They stand out from local child-focused organizations because they directly reach students in classrooms all across the schools. So what's exciting about Foundation 65, one of the reasons I am so grateful they were willing to be used as an example is, again, this is kind of a mouthful. You look at that and say, but what do I do with that? That's a lot of copy. And it isn't even copy, it's not external copy. Again, this is not something I would be putting right on a website. This is something that anyone who's creating a website, who's creating an invitation to a benefit, who is creating our next appeal has as something to spring from. When I talk to people who are copywriters or graphic designers or website designers, and I say, wow, what if you had something like this when you were getting ready to do your work? They say, oh, that would be so great, because they know what they're supposed to convey. And it then affects the tone, it affects colors, it affects imagery and language all throughout their work. So the purpose of this is essentially to inform that work. Now, Foundation 65, super impressive effort. They were just weeks away from their annual benefit when we finished creating this positioning statement, and the board chair went home, took the 2-minute video they had already created to show at their benefit, and he redid the voiceover. So he's the narrator in a 2-minute video, and he immediately put this to work by rewriting the script. And so when you listen to the script or the voiceover in this short video, you're going to hear how he wove this in literally overnight. I was so impressed. I'm going to play this. I believe it will play and everyone will be able to hear it, but I believe we're also putting the link in the chat just in case it doesn't play for anyone.
I'm ready. Where we reside, we speak love fluently.
Hablamos el idioma del amor.
Where we reside, we speak love fluently.
For you, for I, for Evanston Pride.
In free will, we reside.
Foundation 65 is a grant-making organization that supports literacy and the arts for District 65 students during their foundational years.
With a devotion to turn commotion into songs in the key of life, storms into a downpour of poems, showing our might and our wisdom.
Our funds give educators voice and agency, empowering them to lead as we strive for educational equity.
Finding the rhythm of heartbeats and riding it when we speak, read, and write. We compel letters to words, words to sentences, sentences to ideas, and ideas to beating wings.
In Evanston, we value our diversity. We're committed to public education.
I saw so much great work going on.
These are our kids. This is our community. It is where we reside.
We help those in need because we all need help.
All need help. Youth of the foundation, the pillars of the real social network, weaving a cultural fabric of all West Coast. Young sisters, young brothers, all identities each other. Rise above systems that keep us below.
Ready to grow, to learn, to glow, to earn, to show concern and self-worth. Put our neighborhood on the map of the earth.
Yeah.
With your investments, your resources, your time, and your commitment, we can make Evanston-Skokie a place where all of our children thrive. All that we do is made possible because of the ongoing support of ordinary people with extraordinary Evanston pride.
For you. For I.
For I.
For I.
In free will.
We reside.
To learn more about the incredible work that we do and how to give your support, please visit foundation65.org.
So, just going to pop here. So I want to pause and see if there are questions, but I'm hoping what you could see from that video was how immediately the process of creating a positioning statement, how quickly it equipped them, and again, through his work, through Keith's work, equipped them to take that and rewrite that script, weaving in what we had discovered and explored together, weaving that in and making, I think he felt the video became much more powerful as they moved and integrated that language. Here's the example, and just looping us back to the unified voices. There, if each person is out there making sure we found that common thread and talks about we improve Chicago's environment, we reach our target with that message, and then we have that chance to talk about the specifics as we learn more about the particular person, whether they're an advocacy person or a give out the bikes person, we have that opportunity to talk with them. Right now, there is a lot that feels out of our control. It's harder to communicate. And we may have to be extra assertive to get attention and participation in our organizations. But what we can control is our mission and how we want to take that outreach to people and reach our target markets. So may you need to refine your positioning? Yes. And as I mentioned, you may need to rethink what is happening for your target market right now to make sure your messaging can connect with them. But for starters, if we have that foundation in writing, we can edit it. And that's where I encourage people to take these steps and work through this kind of an approach to get themselves to that foundational positioning. So to pause for questions and then talk about the what's next. Let's see where we are in our question territory. Looks like we are okay for now. So I want to make sure we have that chance. Nope, we just have one question coming in. Okay, so I think that the question coming in is identifying the market's needs, wants, or concerns totally dependent on doing surveys, or are there other ways to achieve this? Excellent question. So it is not totally dependent on doing surveys. And I often think that the magnitude of the decisions or the work we're trying to do in any given moment should help us determine whether or not we need to make a big investment in research, for instance, surveys, or whether a smaller step can be taken in a given moment. So one thing to do, I think, is to think through this exercise, even just get it in your head and start to have conversations with people. If you can get yourself into an objective mindset where you are trying to ask the questions in a way that you're willing to receive what people tell you and hear it, even if it doesn't quite match up with what you think you want to hear, asking people what they get out of being connected to you, how they think about you, and taking in that information in as systematic a way as you can start to inform your positioning all the time based on what you already know and what you experience through people. Yes, surveys are another way to do this, but yes, they're also a bigger investment of time and money. So that's my both and answer to that question. I also see a question coming in about target types. How many target types should an organization narrow down to? Oh, good question. I encourage people to first go ahead and list them all so that you don't have that nagging feeling of maybe I forgot one. Go ahead and list them all, and then see if you can get them into an order, and with an order based on who does the marketing need to speak to, and one of the reasons. So thinking about when we think about a person, when you're looking at me and if you're telling me about your organization, you don't know if I'm a potential user of services, if I'm a potential donor, if I'm a potential audience member, or if I work at a foundation. And I may be all of those things. So that's where that unified message is so important. So I would go ahead and list all the organization types. Then I would think about that prioritizing. And then I would try to get to maybe 2 or 3 at most to take yourself through all this work and look for the unifying thing. I hope that helps out. And then tips on how to get from fill in the blanks to a streamlined tagline. Oh, here I give a shout out to copywriters, I have to say, and it's not what I do. I thank people who know how to take this kind of behind the scenes work we do first, and then weave magic with it. Because I'm more of the data, research person, I'm blown away and impressed as all heck by the creatives who can do that kind of copywriting. And I really do think they're worth their weight in gold. I think that's a really important step. And I think to a streamlined tagline, I love that streamlined is part of your question, because I think the taglines that fail are the taglines that are whole mission statements. Even worse, in fact, are organization names that are whole mission statements. So a tight organization name and a tight tagline are really important. So a few words that people can retain. I know that's not an easy answer to your question, Michelle, because it still says go outside, but I think, a great copywriter, they really do know what they're doing. All right. I hope other questions will occur to you and that you will not hesitate at all to reach out to me to ask them at any point in time. And let's just talk quickly about what's next, because I think we're getting to the end of our time. So continue the work using the template. The idea of today's session was really to equip you and provide a template that you can use. That is why the slides would be available. And that's why we're going to mention, if you read the session description, it talked about possibly buddying up. So the reason I want to talk about the buddy system is I've talked about the buddy system and many times when I've shared this concept before, and people always seem to nod about it and get enthusiastic about it, but I suspect that it's really hard to take action on that. The idea of buddying up with someone outside your organization is that someone outside your organization will challenge you to get rid of your jargon, to simplify, and will help give you some of that external focus. So I think the idea of a marketing buddy is not just an accountability partner, that is, did you do your work, I did mine, but also from an external standpoint to help make you simplify the language and make it compelling to someone outside the organization. So the next step we're going to take is for those who want to remain in, we're going to pop over into another Zoom to help facilitate the process of getting to marketing buddies for those who want it. If you don't hang around for the marketing buddy piece of this today, no problem. This is available to you, and I hope that you'll be able to use it yourselves. And I hope that you'll feel free to get in touch with me to talk about using this as a basis and a touchstone for anything you that is seen externally, and share this with people who implement and speak about your organization, letting them use that unified voice. Today, though, what we're offering you, just if you're interested, is to go from this webinar over into a Zoom room. I think the way that we're working that logistically is that we'll leave this meeting, and I'm counting on my folks on the other side of the meeting to take us from this webinar into a Zoom meeting where you'll be put either in small groups or pairs, and not to do a whole lot of work today. Literally all that would happen today is to say hi to each other. Yeah, I want to be a marketing accountability partner or a marketing buddy, to exchange names and contact information, and to pick a time just to continue the work. I'll be there too if people have questions or just want to chat. And so that's what we're going to do over there in the Zoom meeting for those who pop over into that. Checking over here in the Q&A. Can you send us a template, and can you give us the link? I believe that I'm going to count on our folks who are on the other piece of this to help us make sure that everything can get shared. And as always, I also want to say that while I don't believe it, well, over in the Zoom meeting, I'm happy to always hear about what hit you. What are your takeaways? What are your next steps? If you don't get to share those with me today, feel free to type them into the chat today or right now. Feel free to tell them to me over in the Zoom room, but I'm also always open. I'm always trying to make this better. It's something I've been really working on in the last 6 months to share more often with organizations. And so I'm trying to make it better all the time. I'm interested in what hit you. What are your takeaways and next steps? Where did it miss? Because I want to make this better. So here's how to find me. And I'm always eager for feedback and input.